Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our Science Division Live. We hope that you are staying safe and that you are staying warm on this snowy Thursday afternoon, and thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Talia. I'm the Virtual Experiences Coordinator at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and I am connected via Zoom with Natalie and Salvador Bastian, who are two of our fossil preparators. Now, they, just like so many others, have had to adjust to working from home in this new day and age. And the funny thing is, when your work is prepping fossils, working from home is a little bit more complicated than might be for some of the rest of us. So today they're here to tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a fossil preparator and what it's like to do that kind of work from home. So, Natalie, do you want to tell us a little bit about your job?
Sure. So, working as a fossil preparator, I really have two main parts of my job. So, one part is going out into the field, working with the curators, looking for fossils, collecting the fossils, and then bringing them back to the museum. And then, once the fossils are back at the museum, Salvador and I work with a whole cohort of volunteers to clean the fossils, stabilize them, put all the pieces back together, and then get them ready for research where they can be used by researchers and curators around the world.
Very good. It sounds like a pretty fascinating profession. You get to go out in the field sometimes, you get to do lots of work inside the museum, and I'm sure anytime that you're walking through our prehistoric journey gallery, you might get to look up at some of your work, or anytime that you're walking through the collection. What is your favorite part about being a fossil preparator?
Definitely the field work. There's no better feeling than being out in the middle of the desert and finding a fossil that no other organism has really seen for, tens of millions of years. It's pretty exciting.
Very good. Salvador, do you want to tell us a little bit about your role on the paleontology team and your favorite part of being a fossil preparator?
Sure, I do a lot of the same work that Natalie does, and I think I've got to agree. Going out into the field and seeing things for the first time is really exciting. But that work continues once we bring fossils back to the museum. Every little grain of sand that we scrape away uncovers often a piece of bone or a bit of fossil that nobody's ever seen before for millions of years.
Very good. Well, I know that both of you have come prepared with lots of exciting things to show us, both about the work of the fossil preparator as it normally happens and what it's like to be doing some work from home. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And before I do just want to say a big hello to everybody watching with us on Facebook. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm here to ask some questions of our experts today, but I am also here to watch that Facebook stream. So if you have any questions that you would like me to share with these two today, feel free to pop them in the comments. I am watching and we'll be able to ask them live on camera. Natalie and Salvador, take it away. Tell us about what you're up to.
Sure. So I thought we could talk a little bit about where these fossils come from and why we collect fossils from the places that we do and why we go the places that we go. So I'm going to try to share my screen with you all. So we do field work in 8 different states across the Rocky Mountain region. So this means that we're all the way up in the Dakotas working in fossils that are right around the extinction event that killed off all the dinosaurs about 66 million years ago. And then we also focus on a time period of about 75 million years ago, when North America looked a little bit different. It looked a lot like this. So the whole continent of North America was split into two micro or smaller continents called Laramidia and Appalachia. And a lot of the field work that we do in places like southern Utah and New Mexico, we're collecting fossils to learn more about what North America looked like during this time period when it was split in half. In addition to that, we also get to go to places like Madagascar and collect fossils. And a lot of the fossil work that we do in our prep lab right now is cleaning off fossils that from things like meat-eating dinosaurs, from giant crocodiles that we've collected and worked on over the past few years. And I guess one of the other things that I think is really important to mention is when we go out looking for fossils, we're looking in a really special type of rock. So we're looking in a group of rocks called sedimentary rocks. So these are rocks that are made out of pieces and parts of other rocks that have been broken down over time. So you think about things like sandstones and mudstones and siltstones, things that are carried along by ancient ecosystems, by like ancient river systems, ancient sand dune deposits. These are the types of rocks. When we go out looking for fossils, this is what we're looking in. One of the other things that I think is really fun and exciting about our job is that we get to go out to some pretty cool, pretty remote areas. So this is a picture that one of our museum photographers took from down in New Mexico. So when we find a dinosaur, or any fossil for that matter, we have to bring every single thing that we need with us out to the field on our backs, out to the dig site, so that we can excavate that dinosaur from the ground. So you can see one of our curators here. This is Joe Serta. She's in the blue shirt in the front there. He has a rock saw strapped over his shoulder, and then a crew of volunteers and interns behind him that are carrying things like plaster and burlap and all of the tools that we need to get the fossils out of the ground. I guess, oh shoot, let me see if I can stop the share here. Okay, Salvador, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about what happens to the fossils once we get them back to the museum. So as you can imagine, fossils that are tens of millions of years old are going to be very fragile, and a lot of the time they're embedded in really hard rock. So usually we leave them mostly shrouded in rock when we bring them back to the museum to protect them. We'll bring them back. Let me see if I can share my screen. Where did it go? Is that
While
working?
Salvador gets that up, oh, looks like we've got it. I do just want to say we do have a hello in the Facebook stream from Colleen Wells, who is a paleo volunteer. She says, "Hey, Natalie and Salvador. Thanks for tuning in, everybody."
Hey, is that working?
We got it.
Looks like I've got a spinning wheel on my end, actually. Looks like the internet's going a little slow for me.
That is
so I'll just talk
okay.
about what we do with fossils once we get them back to the museum. Sorry about this. Once we get them back, we usually bring them back in plaster, and we'll cut open the plaster jackets, and often we won't have a very good idea of what exactly we're looking at until we've cleaned off some of what we call the matrix, which is the dirt and rock that surrounds our fossils. That's the process of preparation. And usually at the museum, or often at the museum, we're working on what you sort of think of as fossils, ginormous dinosaurs and mammals and big animals that lived in the past. But of course, just like today, not every animal is big. And what we've got that we're working on at home is some of the smaller things that you can work in your pocket, maybe fit in your pocket when you're coming back from the field. So this is one little fossil jacket that I've just opened today, and I'm going to start working on. And that gives you an idea of what you might start looking at. So we've just got a little piece of plaster full of sand, and I'm going to work on that with some tools that you're probably pretty familiar with. This is just a dental pick, some classic dental tools. We also use toothbrushes. I've got a surgical scalpel, but all these little tools that I'll use to scrape this sand away to try and get that fossil exposed. Now, once I get down to the fossil, it's probably going to be very fragile, so I'm going to use a number of different glues that I've got here to stabilize that fossil and make sure we can see what it is in the future.
Awesome. Natalie, do you want to tell us a little bit about what are some of the tools that you normally use when you're working in our fantastic paleontology prep lab at the museum?
Yeah, so one of the tricky things about working from home is that we don't have access to things like compressed air. And so oftentimes we use these little pneumatic tools that are like miniature jackhammers that help us to remove really hard rock from the surface of fossils. And so since Salvador and I are just sitting at our kitchen tables cleaning off fossils, we're not able to use those tools, which has been limiting in the types of fossils that we can bring home. So we're working on fossils here that are encased in really nice soft rocks, so nice soft sands, nice soft muds that oftentimes we can scrape away with some of those tools that Salvador was just talking about, like scalpels and brushes and pin vices, rather than using something more heavy duty.
Well,
So
great.
I've got some fossils that
some more,
I'd like
Salvador.
to show off. Some of the stuff I've been working on, if people are interested in seeing that.
Yes, please. I do
think
see
we've got
lots
a
of
nice picture of
comments about
an
it.
ankylosaur that we could show off, but this is an ankylosaur osteoderm that I've been puzzling together, which is a piece of bone that's found in the skin of these animals that essentially functioned as armor for that animal. And then I've also got a little claw that I've been working on. Can everybody see that? That's probably from a theropod or meat-eating dinosaur that lived in South Dakota about 67 million years ago.
And Natalie, what are you working on these days?
I must admit, my fossils are a little less charismatic than the things that Salvador has. However, let's see, I've been working on a lot of pieces of vertebrae, tail vertebrae from big long-necked dinosaurs called Titanosaurs. And so this is one of those vertebrae from the dinosaur's tail. This is one of the ones on the bigger side that I actually brought home with me. I do have some smaller guys over here that are pretty cute. This little guy's a little tinier. And then I did finish a while ago. This is a tiny, teeny, tiny little piece of a dinosaur's toe. One of those same long-necked dinosaurs, a Titanosaur. And all of these fossils that are really light in color like this, they all were collected from Madagascar.
Is that a trait of fossils that is specific to Madagascar, or are all of those fossils usually light in color? Do we not see that somewhere different?
Yeah, a lot of the material that we find from Madagascar tends to be this kind of pinkish, whitish color. And so fossils oftentimes will take on the color of the rock that encases them. And so you can see anything from like the fossils that are in our PJ exhibit, from the Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry, or from the Morrison Formation, or that really intense jet black color. And then you get that, complete opposite end of the spectrum with these fossils from Madagascar that are much, much lighter.
And how big was Titanosaur?
Oh, Titanosaurs are, oh, sorry, Salvador. Titanosaurs are these huge, huge plant-eating dinosaurs. I mean, some of them got to be over 100 feet long.
That's pretty enormous. Salvador, did you have something you were going to chime in with?
I guess I'd just like to talk a little bit about why we're preparing these fossils and what's going to happen to them. A lot of folks might not know that aside from all the beautiful exhibits we've got at the Denver Museum, we also have a massive collections facility. And as much as we'd love to show off all of the fossils that we work on in our lab, the museum houses over 300,000 different specimens, and we simply can't have all that on display at one time. So those specimens are available for researchers at home and from around the world in the basement of the museum, in our collection center, where they're used by researchers to try and answer all sorts of different questions about the past on Earth. Besides giving us a snapshot into what ecosystems might have looked like in the past, they also help us to answer big questions like, how did animals recover after a massive extinction? Or what happened to ecosystems of animals living on an island like Madagascar, where they were cut off from the rest of the world? And researchers use these to try and build evolutionary trees and answer all sorts of really cool questions about our dynamic planet.
The purpose of doing fossil preparation is not just so that fossils can go on display. We love putting them on display, of course, but it's also to assist in really important and meaningful scientific research. And if you're watching in Facebook, you might have just seen a photo of our paleontology and earth sciences collections facility that is deep underground at the museum. So that is not a place that you will see on a visit to the museum, but it's right underneath your feet, and it is full to the brim of fascinating fossils. I do see a quick question in the chat, and now that we're talking about fossils that we have in the collection, this might be a good one to pitch to you both now. Mina is wondering, what is the weirdest fossil that you've ever worked with? I think weird is up to your definition.
That's a good question. I think that there's always an element of weirdness when occasionally we'll collect fossils from the field and we have what's called a field guess, where we're kind of uncertain as to what something might be, but we collect it because we know that it's, fossilized bone, and we know it's something. And it isn't until later stages where we get the fossil prepped and cleaned and stable that we figure out, oh, this is a, piece of a backbone, or it's a jaw, or it's a claw. So I guess a lot of fossils are kind of weird in that sense when we first find them in the field, but nothing specific comes to mind. I don't know about you, Salvador.
I think it's kind of funny that you mentioned that with the field ID, because this little claw, before I started preparing it, the tag that we had just said weird bone on it. So it was a total guess as to what it was, and there was no way to figure it out until we were able to get all of that sand off.
How about your favorite fossil in the collection? Do you have a very favorite that you like to look at or that you can remember having brought out of the ground or prepared?
I have a few. I think that the Torosaurus that was found in Thornton a few years ago, that one is just a pretty remarkable fossil in general. And then there's a lot of material that we collect from up in the Dakotas and from Laramidia that are, I mean, they're just remarkable, amazing, one of a kind specimens. So, I mean, it's hard to pick just one thing.
Salvador, how about you? Do you have a favorite?
I think that the snow mass collection is really cool just because there are so many mastodon and mammoth bones in that collection. And I think that that was what was shown in that photo of collections that we had from before.
I think so. That certainly looked like mastodons and mammoths. Is there anything else that the two of you would like to tell us about being fossil preparators, about what you're up to as we adjust to working from home?
I guess the only thing I would say is that, it's kind of nice to have the opportunity to sit down and get to work with these fossils every day. Oftentimes, Salvador and I are wearing, 10 to 20 different hats throughout the course of a workday at the museum. So it's kind of nice to get to spend some time working with the actual fossils and puzzling them back together.
Very good. And Salvador, any last insights you'd like to share? And I do see a couple of questions that have come in via our Facebook stream that I'd love to share with you both in a moment.
I'd just love to hear those questions.
All right, well, let's get it rolling. And then I do see questions are continuing to come in. So Facebook audience, we are watching. If you have a burning question that you have not yet sent to us, do so now because we are watching. Inger is wondering, how do you figure out the type of fossil that something is once you bring it back to the lab? What's a process that you might go through?
So preparation is definitely the first really important part of that process. When something is still buried in sand and mud and dirt, you can't really tell what's going on. Or in some cases, we find a fossil that's fractured into a million pieces. So it'll be puzzling before we can figure out exactly what we're looking at, just like the weird bone claw that I showed off a little bit earlier. But once we get preparation done, sometimes we don't even have any idea what we're looking at. And that's where our team of curators and researchers from all around the globe come in, investigating these fossils and figuring out exactly what prehistoric life forms we've uncovered.
Natalie, anything you want to add? Yeah.
I'm going to add just one more thing to that. So one of the greatest parts about having a collection and a really expansive collection is that when we bring fossils to the lab, get them clean and stabilized and ready for research, is that we can make a really great guess as to what kind of maybe family of dinosaur or family of fossil that this belongs to. And by comparing that fossil to what we have in our collections, or what we don't have in our collections, but maybe another institution does, we're able to at least kind of dial in what kind of critter it could be. And what's really exciting is that if it doesn't fit in, these other specimens that we have, or it doesn't fit with another critter that we have, then maybe it's something new to science.
Very good. I see a question from Catherine and Lena wondering, what are your favorite places to dig for fossils?
I think that some of my favorite places to dig are in the Laramidian rocks that Natalie talked about just a few minutes ago. And that's across Utah and all the way down to Texas and New Mexico. And these rocks are preserved all across the American West. And it's just a really cool time frame full of weird, diverse dinosaurs and crocodiles and turtles and other critters. And it brings us to a lot of beautiful natural places full of new discoveries.
Natalie, how about you?
The same. I think we're so fortunate to be able to get to do field work in the places that we do. I mean, the entire Rocky Mountain region is just one beautiful area that, it's hard to have a bad time finding fossils out in the field.
Very good. And then I see another question from Hillary, who is also a fossil preparator down in Dallas. Perhaps you two know each other. She's wondering, what is your favorite memory that you have while out on a dig?
Oh my gosh, it's hard to pin one down. Hi, Hillary. Good to hear from you. I think anytime that there's a new discovery that's really exciting. One that comes to mind is when we were digging really, truly right in our backyard in Highlands Ranch last summer. Um, we were digging through the mud because it was a very wet site, and a cannonball rolled out of the ground, and we knew we had the very back of a Triceratops skull. And that was a really exciting moment because up to that point, we hadn't found very much of the skull, which is one of the most important parts of the animal to find.
Natalie, how about you? Do you have a favorite memory?
I mean, like Salvador said, it's so hard to pick just one. Every field season is so different, and we all have, there's different crews that come out with us every single year, so each of them is unique, and just, yeah, I mean, it's hard to pinpoint just one, to be honest.
You are indeed two very blessed people with two incredibly cool jobs. We'll take a couple of final quick questions, and then I do have one last one that I would like to pitch to you both before we wrap it up today. Vicky is wondering, what is the oldest fossil at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science? Natalie, we may need you to unmute.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm not sure that I know the answer to that, to be honest with you.
Have we stumped the experts?
I would imagine that stromatolites in our collection would have to be some of the oldest organisms that we have, but in terms of a specific locality or specific specimen, I'm not sure that I would know.
Salvador, any insights?
I would guess that we've got geology or rock specimens. I know that we have geology and rock specimens that go much farther back than our paleontology specimens, but some of the earliest forms of life on Earth, of course, didn't have a backbone. So the things we're showing off to you here that are full of bones would not be the oldest. It would probably be some sort of invertebrate, like a stromatolite, like Natalie's talking about.
Really interesting. It's pretty incredible that we have things in the museum collection that are far, far older than pretty much anything that we see and really interact with in the world around us. One last one before our wrap up question is, Bill is wondering, if you ever put a fossil together incorrectly? Have you ever done something and been like, well, that's not right?
I hope not, but no, I mean, there are definitely moments where, like Salvador and I, before the lab was closed, we were working on putting together a new type of meat-eating dinosaur. And so we'll make fits with temporary glues, because oftentimes if you can fit one piece to another and it has a specific shape that's missing, it's easy to put those pieces back in there to try and or I guess it's easy to see what kind of shape or what piece you might be missing. And so in that sense, we even, put things together where we know that there have been pieces missing from it, but it's really easy to pop them apart and put them back together when we need to. But other than that, I sure hope I've never put anything together the wrong way.
Salvador, that was the question. I saw your message that you had missed that one. That is totally fine. The question was, have you ever put a fossil together incorrectly, like done your work and then been like, well, that I did that wrong?
That's a fair question. It's definitely something we try to avoid. But I'd say we get uncommon for us to have to take something apart to pop something back in.
Sometimes you got to take things apart to put them together the right way. Awesome. Well, that is almost all the time we have. In our last couple of minutes, I would love for you two to tell us, what does anyone who is curious about a career in paleontology, whether it's preparation, whether it's curation, whether it's volunteering with dig crews to go out and actually look for fossils, what are some things that you would recommend that budding young paleontologists or young at heart paleontologists do?
I think it's super important for people to stay curious. So whether that means finding the answers to your own questions online in books, what have you, I think that that's super important. I think learning and spending time in nature is also really important. Get outside, learn more about the amazing world that we live in. And then for those folks that are in school or thinking about pursuing this, take as much science as you can, as many science classes as you can. Writing is often a really important part of being a scientist also. But yeah, I mean, I think just maintaining that curiosity and having that innate curiosity really come forward is really important.
Great advice for us all, even if you don't want to be a paleontologist. How about you, Salvador? Any advice for, I know we have some young folks watching us today. Any advice for anyone who wants to be a paleontologist someday?
I would put in a plug for the volunteer program at the museum. We, as Natalie mentioned, we have a ton of volunteers who work with us in our labs and in the field. And we have volunteer positions and internships, which are great opportunities if you're trying to make a career out of paleontology. Volunteering at the museum is really the way that I got started in paleontology, and it's had a huge influence on my life. So I would definitely recommend applying to be a volunteer if you're really interested in spending some time working on fossils.
That's great advice too. Well, that is about all the time we have for today. So thank you both so much for joining in with us. It was great to get to talk to you. Very cool to know that both of you are still able to do some work at home, even if you don't have all of the fancy pneumatic tools that you would normally have in the lab. Science never stops, and it's great to see that both of you are continuing the research and the great work from your dining rooms, from your living rooms, from wherever you are. To everyone on Facebook, thank you so much for tuning in today. It was so great to have you and to hear your questions. Stay curious, stay warm if you go outside today. And like Natalie said, go outside, enjoy some nature. And like Salvador said, check out being a volunteer. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.